Hello, BookTube. Good morning from a very sunny Sunday morning here in the west of Ireland. I'm coming to you from underneath an oak tree, so there's a pretty healthy ecosystem of different bugs and insects and spiders and all that hanging around. So they might be dropping by every so often, and we also have some horses there in the background. So if no one else watches it, at least the horses will hear my opinion on a few things. So I've seen in the last week that Randy Ray, the literate Texan, and a few others are hosting a new kind of BookTube event, Short Story Summer, and I had to jump on that straight away because I absolutely love short stories. Even when I'm reading a longer book, I tend to have a collection of short stories that I dip into pretty regularly, just to break it up, or just if I'm feeling for something different. I like quite a range of short stories, both ones that are a bit more fantastical, science fiction, that kind of way, and ones that are more kind of realistic. So there's a kind of famous Irish short story writer who had kind of disappeared for a little bit, but I think he's kind of coming back into vogue again, William Trevor. So I'm going to read some more of his stories as part of this. But I had to jump in straight away. And I know people are waiting until August to start, but there's no time like the present, and I had a bit of free time, so I was able to jump in. So what I did was I went back through my Kindle and had a look at some of the anthologies that I have access to on that, rather than reading anything new. Maybe revisiting some of the older stories that I'd read years ago and had either kept thinking about, or perhaps those that had kind of muddled in the back of my mind. It's like, oh, I remember that being a good story, might be a good time to look at it again. And in some cases just opened the book to a random story and said, well, I'll read this is what fate is in store for me. I know that some people have been doing their top favourite the top 5 favourite short stories, which I think is just impossible. I don't even understand how you could come up with the list. What's the criteria? Like, favourite in this particular mood, favourite of a style. It's really hard. I've made a few attempts of trying to jot it down, and what I kept coming back to was just short stories that I just vividly remember or been very, very influential on me. I now realise I don't have that little scrap of paper that has those, so that might be another video that comes out at another time. But I thought I'd kind of tease it there. What I have read is kind of a selection of short stories that have a mix of ones that I'd read before and those that I had never come across, or that are in anthologies that I already own. And I just kind of keep digging through. I suppose the great thing about anthologies is you get such a wide variety. I mean, you're at the editor's mercy, but in general, there'll be a few gems, there'll be a few duds. The duds make the gems feel better. Some of the duds are kind of good in their own terrible way. I'm thinking particularly of a short story I read that was just so god awful. I might dig it out again and reread it for as part of this kind of tag. Now I know there's a kind of a bingo card, kind of criteria of different short stories to read each day. I'm not going to do that. I mean, I don't live in the continental US, so I can't enter the competition. But more importantly, it's kind of a bit too prescriptive for me. But what I will do is maybe at the end see how wide my reading has been compared to it. See, was it all concentrated in one area? Would I have filled out most of it? Would I have filled out a bit of it? It just might be a bit of fun to do. But over the last 2-3 days, I've had some time to read some short stories, and they have been, to be honest, they've all been pretty good. So there is, the first one I read was one called Spherical Trigonometry, which is part of a collection called Cthulhu Reigns, and the conceit of that collection is that all the stories have to be set kind of in that kind of weird fiction, but post the kind of cataclysmic event. So post hell opening up, post the great Cthulhu rising from the sea and destroying everything, post the apocalypse, which led to some very creative and interesting stories, some kind of duddy kind of pastiche kind of things that weren't great. But this one, called Spherical Trigonometry, by a Japanese author called Ken Asamatsu, and translated by Edward Lipset. It was really quite interesting because it was interesting for me to think about what's weird from another culture. What would they find to be post-apocalyptic? How is that different from other stories, or stories from more kind of Western focused, or more I suppose English speaking, more of the English speaking world. I think sometimes things are over egged. And sometimes the difference between Japan and the rest of the West, I think, is over exaggerated. They still have traffic lights, policemen, cars. The rules of the road are similar. They have parliamentary democracy, from what I understand. But still, at the same time, it's very interesting to see a different point of view. And it certainly was a very interesting story. Quite different. The twist on the end was a bit of a play on words that it translated well, I felt. And yeah, the whole way through the way the horror was presented and described, it was incredibly creepy, incredibly interesting, and then the very end, to see what the post-apocalypse looked like, again, was very satisfying and felt very eerie and Japanese, if I can say that. So yeah, that was. If you can dig that one out, I think it doesn't take much time, maybe 20 minutes to read. Well worth your time. The next one was a very, very short piece of fiction called by a very famous Irish writer called Flann O'Brien. That was his nom de plume. His real name was Brian Nolan, or Brian O'Nulan, because he was a fluent Irish speaker, so he sometimes went by his Irish name as well. He was also known as Miles Nagopleen, which means Miles of the Little Ponies. That was a satirical newspaper column that he used to write for the Irish Times in, I think, like the 30s, 40s, up into the 50s, maybe the 60s. He's most famous for two books, which are At Swim Two Birds and The Third Policeman, both excellent kind of surrealist, postmodern humour. If that doesn't put you off, I'd say definitely give it a go. Give both of them a go. They're both very, very, very different books and extremely popular here in Ireland. But I have a collection of his short fiction, which is a little bit less known. And the one I read was When I Met William of Orange. Extremely short piece of work. Extremely short. Now, William of Orange, for those who may not know, was a Dutch king who became King of England in the 1600s through basically so that the Stuart King of England, who was a Catholic, wouldn't become king. They brought over William of Orange of the Netherlands, and he became King of England and Great Britain, and is not a very popular figure in Irish history, where he defeated King James of England at the Battle of the Boyne, and it's caused nothing but trouble ever since then. But in this short piece of fiction, Flann O'Brien everyone speaking very kind of colloquial English-Irish of the time, of the contemporary time when the story was written, and kind of there is a good twist at the end. I think you can kind of see it coming, but the whole thing is maybe 3-4 pages long, so it's, it's not too shocking to see it coming. But I think it's really well done. Flann O'Brien is famous for being very humorous. not, I don't always find them very funny, but certainly the last section of the last section of this short story was extremely funny. And yeah, again, if you can come across it, I'd highly recommend it. Going about as far away from humour as you can, I read An Account of the Decline of the Great Auk by One Who Witnesses by Jessie Greengrass. And my little list has gone down. Jessie Greengrass is a contemporary short story writer. I read her collection in 2019, so it was interesting to reread this one. And the collection takes its name from this particular short story. And yeah, it's harrowing. It's if there was once quite a large bird, looked a bit like a penguin with a much larger beak, called an auk, that lived in the North Atlantic, and it's gone now. It's been wiped out by humans quite recently, and this story is from the point of view of one of those humans who did nothing but destroy this creature, wiped it from the earth, and that he doesn't care. In fact, he blames the auk for being so weak that it allowed itself to be wiped out. It's rough stuff, but it's very, very well written, very interesting story, and you know, it really shows some of the worst that humanity does to the earth. So it's, yeah, not pleasant reading, but definitely a very, very good and effective short story. And in a kind of a lighter note after that one, because that one was very heavy, I read the book, two Don Camillo short stories. So Don Camillo is a character created by the Italian writer Giovanni Gorecci, and it's a really interesting character. It's kind of a parish priest from the 1950s in rural Italy, and it's basically our Don Camillo, who was this, who could have been a boxer, huge, enormous, bit of muscular Christianity figure, and the local mayor, Paponi, who's a dyed-in-the-wool Marxist, and the two of them constantly butt heads. But the stories are extremely charming, extremely uplifting, and kind of shows a lot of shared humanity. It was a nice one to read after the Jessie Greengrass story, and the two of those I read were Rustic Philosophy and Juliet and Romeo, and you can't go wrong with Don Camillo. I don't know who translated them. It wasn't noted in the collection, but yeah. So those are the start of Short Story Summer, and yeah, I hope to read a lot more. Thank you, BookTube.